Let's go, I'm a bulldog.
Hello, DawgNation, and welcome to Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. And most of today's show is going to be spent looking ahead, but we would be doing a disservice if we didn't call back to last week. Various top targets for UGA were at the Georgia-Alabama game. In the mind of a recruit, are you more looking at how many touches and the impact that Ryan Williams made? Are you more impressed by what Georgia was able to do in the second half in that environment, which was absurd?
Yeah, Kaylee, so I think the big thing is a missed opportunity. Like they had a chance to, listen, we knew all the storylines, right? Take down Saban's old program on Saban Field, show the correct pecking order in the SEC. Heck, Kaylee, maybe the wide receiver, offensive talent, quarterback, wide receiver recruits were enthused to see Georgia throw for 439 yards in a game, especially like 394 yards and a half. But again, I think a lot of Georgia's talent that was there, kind of defensive side of the ball, and really it's like Georgia got punched in the mouth defensively where it looked like, I don't want to use the word neuter, but it looks like the great Georgia defensive juggernaut was kind of helpless against Alabama. And like a lot of people believe Georgia is the baddest defensive program in the land, maybe rightfully so, but they had a chance to go over to Tuscaloosa to really set the food chain in the SEC about Georgia is definitely the new sheriff in town, and Bama, you're not even on my level. Bama, get off my level. And it wasn't that at all. I mean, one of the things that I think people will take away, and listen, most of them are probably negative recruiting-wise for Georgia, is that, hold on, wait a minute. Bama's playing all their freshmen, and they're winning. And mostly the majority of Georgia's freshmen aren't playing, and they lose a shootout.
You mentioned missed opportunities. Well, we're not missing any opportunities on today's episode of Before the Hedges. This is what we've got going on today's rundown. What happened in the Alabama game made a lot of Georgia fans upset, and maybe not for the reasons that you think. I think everyone is on the hunt for their own Ryan Williams. So more on that in just a minute. Usman Kroma supposed to make his decision last Saturday, but he's pushed it back to this Saturday, so we'll get to where things stand now that a week has passed. Homecoming is going to bring in a lot of stars, not just for 2025 and 2026. We're going to give you the top visitors that will be in Sanford Stadium for the game on Saturday against Auburn. Then we have our Mansell's details with the best class plays that we could find from UGA's current commits in 2025 and 2026, followed by our Dawg of the week, who will have had the best performance last Friday. And then we will wrap up the show with our question of the week, and then we'll remind you what Georgia has in the 2025 class and tell you what they're still looking for. But let's start with this. It's been dramatic. It's been everything you think it would be. I feel young and restless even just after watching this whole debacle go down, with not just the wide receiver recruiting aspect, but also the question that you brought up in the open of our freshmen aren't playing. If you look at the numbers outside of special teams, because Kirby loves to remind us that they play freshmen on the special teams.
And when you start on special teams.
Exactly. But if we're looking at snaps outside of special teams, all of Georgia's 41 snaps played by freshmen came by KJ Bolden on Saturday. Alabama, on the other hand, outside of special teams, had 176 snaps played amongst 5 freshmen. Now, Ryan Williams took up a lot of those, but, I mean, that's a humongous difference. And considering the fact that Georgia had the #1 recruiting class in the 2024 cycle. So why aren't we seeing more of them, especially in a game like that where you're down so much in the first half?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned 176 snaps. That's almost one for every yard Ryan Williams had receiving. Kaylee, I think the thing is that Alabama, let's look at it. They lost Caleb Downs to Ohio State. Terran Arnold is now with the Detroit Lions. The Kool-Aid McKinstry is another one of their first-round corners that went off to the NFL. So they really cleaned house at defensive back. Now, Georgia, Some might say they cleaned house too. Tyke Smith went off to the NFL. He's with the Bucks, performing very well, I might add. Then you've got Kamari Lassiter starting for the Houston Texans, and also you've got Javon Bullard starting for the Green Bay Packers. The problem was Georgia had a little bit of depth to go beyond that, and Alabama didn't. They're turning to a lot of their freshmen, the freshman DBs, and especially the freshman wide receiver, which will dominate our topics today. Like you mentioned the young and the restless. I mean, this is the red and black and the restless because they want to know, like, you know, as I will say this, Kaylee, as someone that grew up a young man, the son of the South, that sometimes my grandmothers and my aunts always kept me on Friday nights or maybe after school or Friday night date nights for my parents. I saw a lot of Falcon Crest. I saw a lot of General Hospital. I saw a lot of, Dallas. I saw a lot of all of it. General Hospital even. And right now, what's going on around Georgia right now with the recruiting certainly feels like one of those daytime or evening soap operas.
So before we get to the wide receiver soap opera, there's two freshmen in particular that I want to talk about. I feel like these are the ones that DawgNation is like, where are they and why aren't we using them? One's got to be Nate Frazier because he made such an impact in that Clemson game. We haven't seen much from him since. Alabama's a little bit different because you're not going to run the ball in that situation, but I think that we would have seen more of him in that Kentucky game.
Well, I think the usage thing for me with Nate that pops out is why not use him in the screen game? Why not use him as a receiver, catch him on a wheel route? So what I've heard, Kaylee, is Nate Frazier hasn't had the best of practices lately. And the other thing, when you want to go cause and effect about why Nate was able to make such a big splash against Clemson and not much sense, is I think it all points to Trevor Etienne. It points to him not being up. For some reason, he was either suspended or just needed another week to try on the uniform and make sure it works out in Athens. But he didn't play against Clemson. That took one running back out of the rotation, and I think that elevated Nate Frazier.
I think another one that specifically I was thinking about more so in the Alabama game is nobody could guard Ryan Williams. Our best versus their best, nothing was happening. Malachi Starks didn't play a great game. I didn't think Julian Humphrey played a great game either. But we have the number one cornerback in the class of 2024 in Ellis Robinson, who didn't play a snap outside of special teams. Now, I'm not saying that he was going to be able to make all the difference in that game, but I would think that this is somebody who's on the same level as a KJ Bolden, and we'd be seeing a lot more of by this point in the season.
Yeah, I think it's kind of due to the fact that a little bit, again about Georgia's depth. I mean, the thing I noticed is Georgia was trying all the different possibilities at corner. Dalen Everett, who hadn't had the best season so far as well, he got kind of shuffled out. And they had Daniel Harris in there in the second quarter of all things, so Georgia was really trying for it. Now, I will say this. Ellis, I must have interviewed him 10, 12 times. He told me that one of his goals for his freshman year was to make the freshman All-American team. Well, you can't make the freshman All-American team if you're not getting snaps. And I think Georgia, this is the part of the schedule where they wanted to get Ellis ready, especially after Alabama. You've got Alabama, and then you've got Auburn, you got Mississippi State, then you got Texas. I think this next 4 or 5 games was when Ellis was probably going to be ready, or they're going to try and accelerate him to get him ready. And I'll say one thing, Kaylee, and this is maybe we need to make some staging for this, but this is my Sentell soapbox moment right here, is I saw Ellis Robinson. Like, what's the conversation right now? Who's the best freshman wide receiver in college football? It's either Ryan Williams or who?
Jeremiah Smith.
So I saw Ellis just act like a total dog against Jeremiah Smith in 7-on-7s. He shut him down. He neutralized him. At the worst, it was a stalemate. He made plays. So Ellis has all the ability in the world, but we got to remember this. I thought Kaylee, I thought Connor Riley had a really good story on DawgNation.com today, where he talked about, a lot of Georgia's best players. Kamari Lassiter sat and watched, but then sprung onto the scene his second year starting at Georgia. A lot of Georgia's best corners still don't play right away. Tyson Campbell did, but then he lost his job to Eric Stokes. That cornerback position is very much a nuanced position at Georgia, where no matter how talented you are, you're just not going to come in and grab the reins. Kaylee, I will admit one thing totally here on our air right now. The one thing that I was talking about, Georgia recruits all these great players. Sometimes in a game like that gets magnified, it's the ones that they didn't get. And I think of somebody that's now a junior in college football that's now a Heisman Trophy candidate. That's Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Travis Hunter was a guy that maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the NIL climate wasn't what it is right now. Maybe Georgia would have felt a lot more comfortable giving a KJ Bolden-sized package to Travis Hunter back then. And when you try to beat an Alabama, I'm going to stress this, Kaylee, you're going to have an optimum player asset across the field from their five-star receiver. We see it every year. We see it every stinking time the Dogs play the Crimson Tide. They have a five-star optimal receiver, one of the best in college football, on their side, and they have a quarterback each and every contest that's playing better. That combination, quarterbacks and wide receivers, are why Georgia keeps losing these shootouts to Alabama.
Well, let's be real here. Georgia got exposed by a 17-year-old. Did you know he's 17, by the way?
I think so. I think that driver's license has seen as much airtime as McLovin from Superbad. You know what I'm talking about right there?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody talks about Ryan Williams. We had a DawgNation invasion event Friday night, and we were in the Dave & Buster's in Birmingham, and I told all our dog people that were there, I was like, guys, that name is going to cause some problems. Ryan Williams, to me, looks like he doesn't need 2 more years of college football. He might be ready after 1 more.
Yeah, well, he had 6 receptions for 177 yards and a touchdown. And look, that's something that only happens in a very soap opera-esque thing where somebody that young does something that big. And after that performance, it just like completely opened up this floodgate of everyone being like, why don't we have that? And I believe that you got a tweet this week that we can flash on the screen here. And I think this represents what everybody was feeling this week about why can't we have our own? Where are our wide receivers? This comes from Savage James. He said, you know what everyone wants to know. When is UGA going to recruit a game-breaking wide receiver, or even can they stack a duo? Well, this got Jeff and I talking about the receiver recruiting at Georgia. We went all the way back to 2021 to break down every single wide receiver recruit that Georgia has gotten since 2021. We'll show you this here. I mean, it's honestly really disappointing. In 2021, they get Jackson Meeks, who's transferred, and A.D. Mitchell, who transferred and is now in the NFL. Then in 2022, Denylon Morissette, he's gone. Dylan Bell, one of the only people on this slide who's a contributor. Cole Spear, still at Georgia, but not a contributor in the wide receiver room. C.J. Smith transferred. Then 2023, which was not that long ago, 2 out of those 3 guys have transferred. And Anthony Evans got the most playing time we've seen him have in this game against Alabama, and it still wasn't that much. And then our 2024 guys in Sokovie White and Nitro Tuggle haven't seen meaningful snaps yet. And, by the way, no 5 stars on this board. What is it going to take for UGA to be able to go out and find that guy that everybody now realizes we're in desperate need of?
Kaylee, I feel you on that one. I think DawgNation is feeling you guys right now. And I'm going to tell you what, this is the #1 question I've gotten on my social media, my direct messages, my text messages. They're like, Jeff, you know you play traffic cop with all, maybe traffic cop's not the best word, you play crossing guard with all the big-time prospects that are coming into Georgia. And where are the wide receivers? Well, I mean, my mom this week, Kaylee, Glenda up in LJ, she said, Jeff, what in the world? Can Georgia not get a receiver like that? Where does Georgia find a receiver like that? And first of all, this is kind of multifold. But the first thing about this soap opera, Kaylee, and it is the young, this is the red, the black, the young, the red and black, and the restless. If we go back to that graphic, let me just point out one thing. If we had one of these handy-dandy Before the Hedges laser pointers, let's look at this combined collectively here, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Folks, this is a damning point I'm about to make. Mm-hmm. Look at all this right here. And with all respect to a lot of these names on there, Cole Spear is a warrior on special teams. But when you're looking at your last 4 signee classes of wide receivers, and you have 1 contributor and at the starting level in the Georgia-Alabama game in 2024, something is very wrong here. That's how you lose that game like that. It's not that can you find a 5-star at Georgia like Alabama has with Ryan Williams. Kaylee, quick history lesson. Georgia has to go all the way back to 2019 and George Pickens to find their last 5-star wide receiver signee. Now, they signed three top 100 receivers in 2020. Arian Smith is one of those, so that would be another contributor. But that's the 5 recruiting classes ago. So I'm talking when you're trying to find the next Ryan Williams, well, Georgia doesn't have the bold history with 5 stars like Alabama does. The Jerry Judys, the Calvin Ridleys, the Devonta Smiths, the Ryan Williams, so on and so on. You go to Pickens, but then you got to go back to the next one prior to that. Terry Godwin and Mecole Hardman, 2015 and 2016, they were both rated as athletes, not pure receivers. And then you go back to that, you got to go Marlon Brown, I believe, in 2011, 2010. And then prior to that is A.J. Green. So you can cross, where we go? We went 2007 to 2024, 17 years. And Georgia only has 4 guys that they've signed that was a 5-star receiver, and 2 of those were athletes. That's just not going to get it done. And another thing, how does Georgia get a 5-star wide receiver? Kaylee, I'm going to tell you, cheddar, cash money, and that's how you go about and get the 5-star receivers these days. Georgia's plan, like look how they supplemented all those misses at receiver. Dominic Lovett, transfer from Missouri. It's probably a starter at Missouri when they get him. Colby Young, starter at Miami. And then you look at who else they got. I mean, folks, I don't know how many people on all your shows that you watch are saying this, but Ra Thomas did some dumb things that got him kicked off the team. But if Ra Thomas didn't get kicked off the team and he was healthy, he would have been Georgia's best ex-receiver against Alabama. But still, when you're relying on the portal, I think Georgia and Kirby Smart do a great job every year of analyzing, self-scouting, where they need to do better. The same way Nick Saban in 2011, the college football world thought that the game had passed him by with the Cam Newton game. And you know how he reimagined himself? He came out with Sarkisian. Mm-hmm. He came out with Lane Kiffin. He opened up his offense. He started attracting better receivers. And I think that's how he evolved. And I think Kirby Smart is showing a way to evolve. But he's going to have to look at that wide receiver position. And if he ever wants to say, you know what, maybe a great cornerback, maybe the best cornerback in the world still's not going to help you guard a Ryan Williams when you got a dual threat like Jalen Milroe out there. Sooner or later, you got to bring just as big a gun to the fight if this is the OK Corral as the other guys. And wide receiver recruiting, Kaylee, that means paying the amount of money that Georgia has no problems paying defensive linemen and linebackers for. Georgia might have to reevaluate. If you want a Ryan Williams, if you want a 5-star dog, you're going to have to pay for him.
I'm glad you bring this up because as of late, and we've discussed this, the priority has suddenly become the defensive line recruiting. But knowing what we now know, and based off what we saw, where does wide receiver go up on the priority list of positions?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where you got to figure out, Georgia wants to find that great fit. And, there's some encouraging news with Coley and the receivers this year because Coley, one thing he could always do is he could always recruit. He got Riley Ridley into Athens. Mecole Hardman committed and signed under his watch as well. But Georgia has got to find, you talk about the soap opera. We've got so many levels to this, but I think they're set to sign in this class Talon Taylor, a name you guys have heard already a lot on this show every week. He is going to sign, and he is definitely a dog. Georgia got kind of lucky on that one. He came into high school at Geneva, Illinois, a Georgia fan. Georgia kept winning. Georgia prioritized him, even though Ohio State wants him. He's going to wind up, he's like 67, 75 right now. I think he's going to wind up a top 40 overall prospect, which would be Georgia's highest rated receiver signee since George Pickens. But I think they need more than that. I think they need to, you have to look at that game because, if anybody else out there is fine with Georgia winning every game and then they get to Alabama or they get to Ohio State and they lose a shootout, let me tell you, when Georgia faces Ohio State, which I still think they will in the college football playoff, you're going to see 2 players just like Ryan Williams on Ohio State's side. You're going to see Jeremiah J.J. Smith. You're going to see some other of the many 5-star receivers they've signed. And you're going to get to this big boy football problem where, sure, pass rush affect the quarterback, get in the quarterback's face, that can really hurt. That can really hurt a team, but you also need to have big guns of your own to come at it.
Well, just like a soap opera, there's always going to be twists and turns at every corner. Plot twists coming out of nowhere. So you can imagine my shock when I get on Twitter last week, I'm scrolling through, and I see this tweet from Thomas Blackshear. It reads this: I am still committed to the University of Georgia. I am just opening up my recruitment. Jeff, imagine telling your wife that. Like, we're still married, but I might see other people. How is that supposed to make not just Georgia, but everyone who's been keeping up with him feel?
Yeah, guys, I want you that we hear a lot from folks at the university that watch our programs and keep up with Georgia recruiting. Why don't you try this with your boo? Why don't you say, hey, Monday through Friday, we're dating, we're together, we're a couple, but on weekends or when we go away on away games, I'm gonna be free to do whatever I want. Kaylee, if we look back at that tweet, let me give you some high stakes recruiting interpretation. I am still committed to the University of Georgia. I'm just opening up my recruitment. Those are mutually polarizing statements right there. That might as well you be saying, you know what? We're going to throw the ball to the receivers 35 times a game on deep balls and fades, but we're still going to run the ball 45 times a game as a priority for the University of Georgia. You can't have one of those without the other. Thomas Blackshear, since he's looking around, to me, that seems like that is very much a contested recruitment. And Kaylee, not the only wide receiver drama for your mama right here. Not only do you have the continued things right there with the back and forth, Thomas Blackshear, you also have Tyler J. Williams, kind of still repping the U, still talking on social media about Miami. Now, he says he's still likely probably still going to be a Dawg, but Miami's coming, and he's listening a little bit. So you want more wide receiver drama? You want more wide receiver recruiting issues? Well, Georgia's got some good ones coming, but 2 of those 4 that they have committed are now showing some cracks in the armor in terms of their commitment.
I think it goes back to what you said. It's all about the dollar. If you want a guy like that, you're going to have to spend the money. Personally, I would rather go quality over quantity. There are 4 receivers signed in this class. I think I would rather have 2 at the higher level than have 4 that are just kind of hanging in there. I know you believe that Talon Taylor could be the next guy for us, and we're going to see more of him later, but I think you got to go quality and wide receivers.
I think it's going to be very interesting, the 2026 cycle. We're going to get into some of our UGA visitors for the Auburn game a little bit later on in the program. But Kaylee, 2 of the top 26 wide receivers in the country, 2 of the top 5 are both from the state of Georgia. Douglas County's Devin Carter and Aaron Gregory. They're going to both be at Georgia this weekend for the Alabama game. Now, Aaron's told me pretty sure he's going to make it. But I don't know about Devin. Devin's kind of up and down. Wait and see on that one. But do you pay those guys? The 2 of the best 5 in the state, do you pay those guys? Do you kind of bank on that homegrown love a little bit? Maybe easier to hold on to them in the portal era when they're from Georgia. This is their home state. They're not far away from mom and mom's home cooking. Maybe. But I think what you're going to try to do in the 2026 class, Kaylee, they've already got a deadly quarterback coming in Jared Curtis, who can do some of those Jalen Milroe type things. That's the other thing I heard is like Georgia fans want to have their own Jalen Milroe back there, and they want to have their own Ryan Williams back there. And even at the expense of having 7 great offensive linemen and 6 great defensive linemen and all these linebackers and tight ends, when it looks like the premium positions that decide these games, Georgia is deficient in compared to Alabama, not the rest of the country, but especially to maybe an Alabama and Ohio State. You have to reevaluate what you're going to do. Maybe Georgia changes the NIL philosophy with those in-state kids in the 2026 class, or maybe they go out and get better guys out of the portal. But again, let's come back to it. You're going to have to pay more to get them. But the other thing is the ones you do sign, Kaylee, the ones that get the Georgia stamp and make it, you got to get them on the field. One guy out of the last 4 recruiting classes, that's not going to beat Bama.
So let's move to the other side of the ball. We got one last tweet to show you here. This one's about defensive line recruiting. It comes from GoDogs_UGA. He said, we seem to be missing on elite defensive line talent lately. I love the guys we have, don't get me wrong, but can we expect some big names and bodies for our defensive line this recruiting cycle? The first half of this conversation, pretty much on the negative end. But we've got to end with some positive news from you because, I mean, we do.
If there's one thing Georgia's got, and if there's one thing that's coming in the 2025 class, we got your DLs. I mean, right now, crystal ball traffic, sourcing, grapevine, the way things are leaning. Number 1 defensive tackle in the country, Elijah Griffin, very likely to choose Georgia. Number 2 defensive tackle in the country, Justice Terry out of Manchester, also from the great state of Georgia. Those guys, the best, most likely outcome for their recruitments is to come to Georgia. That would be the number 1 and the number 2 defensive lineman in the class. That's never happened under Kirby Smart. I don't think that's ever happened anywhere in the time frame of Georgia. You have to go back rarely when Georgia got a guy like Trenton Thompson as the number 1 overall defensive tackle in the country. And if you want big rankings, if you also want big bodies, there's also Stephon Shivers out of Brentwood Academy now in Humboldt, originally out of Humboldt. He's the 3-star defensive line, future anchor I think he's going about 6'5", 360 right now. Has a 67-yard rushing touchdown. You guys have seen it on Before the Hedges at all. He's playing both ways right now at Brentwood. He won't be there for the Auburn game, but he should come back for the Tennessee game. Help's on the way. I tell you, folks, you're going to love all the answers I have to say about defensive line recruiting. I know you guys are going to be skeptical when it comes to wide receiver recruiting, at least for the time being.
All right, everybody, you can take your deep breath.
NC.
And cut.
NC.
Sometimes on Before the Hedges, we have to have the tough conversation, so please don't send us to the General Hospital for this. It was, you got to do what you got to do. I did watch some soap operas with my grandparents. Shout out Mama and Pawpaw for culturing me. So in just a moment, we're going to do an update on Usman Chroma's decision that's coming up this Saturday. But first, we want to remind you guys that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger. This week is homecoming for Georgia. A lot of you are going to be tailgating out there. We want to let you know that Kroger has all your MVPs for tailgates this football season, from chips and snacks to cold drinks for cheersing, which I hope DawgNation will be doing a lot of this weekend. Or if you just want a party trade to make your week a little bit easier, make sure you visit your local Kroger, or if you want to make it even easier and do delivery, you can go online at Kroger.com. It's funny that we're about to have this exact same conversation, but some things have changed since then. The four-star running back, Usman Chroma, out of Leesburg, was supposed to make his decision last Saturday, but decided to push it back to this Saturday. He'll make his decision at 11. His final three: Georgia, Auburn, Florida State. This time last week when we were having this conversation, he was crystal balled to go to Auburn. But not so quick. This week, his crystal ball is now in at Georgia. What changed?
Well, it's probably not watching the Alabama game and seeing they could sure use a running back, because, it was encouraging to wide receivers and quarterbacks, probably not running backs, when ETN only gets 12 carries and the team has to kind of bypass the run game, at least not except in short yardage, goal line situations. Now, Usman's going to make his decision. It was pretty interesting. His Lee County team improved to 5-0 on the year. They beat unbeaten Thomas County Central. It was a hard charging day for Usman. He had, I believe, 14 carries for 30 yards, but then he caught 105 yards worth of balls in as a receiver. Look at him breaking down, telling the world he actually can dance. Kaylee, I also think it's very interesting, something you mentioned before we got into the soap opera territory of our conversation. Georgia and Auburn are the two teams that are playing on Saturday, and those were really their final two finalists. Let me say this Before the Hedges and DawgNation. I really think things have been different for Usman since he visited Georgia for September 7th for Tennessee Tech. That might not sound like a marquee matchup to really attract the eyeballs, but I think that was the seismic moment, I might say, in Usman's commitment potential with the University of Georgia. What happened there is he got to hang out with players. He got to see the team. He felt the love. Everybody wants to feel the love. Not only is it the NIL love, but it's still the wanted, needed, feel the love with that. And I think Usman and his teammate Jeremiah McLeod really benefited from the time they got to spend with Georgia players. They got to see what a weekend in the life would be like, a week in the life was, and that was some encouraging things. And really, I think from that point, I really felt that the chances were getting stronger and stronger for Usman to choose Georgia. And actually now, as he makes his decision on Saturday, I think right now Georgia's case is about as good as anyone's.
I was going to say, he also saw the downfall and complete disruption of both Auburn and Florida State, and I think that would be enough to convince me, there's only one school for me in here. But we're going to have to wait till Saturday at 11 a.m. pre-Georgia Auburn to know for sure. We'll have more on that next week. Also with the Auburn game, it's homecoming, which I love that we are having Auburn for the homecoming game, but this is only the second home game of the year. So we're going to have some big visitors on the scene, starting with this one, who we've been keeping our eye on all season long. It's Justice Terry, the 5-star defensive lineman in the class of 2025 out of Manchester, Georgia, currently undecided, but was once a former Georgia commit. I feel like he's getting closer and closer to a decision, and hopefully he'll like what he sees on Saturday. Yeah,
Kaylee, you were quite the soothsayer when you created that graphic, because right now he's from Manchester, Georgia, but I don't know how active he is on the Manchester High football team. I've got people telling me he hasn't played a lot this year.
Ooh.
He's still working out with the team and practicing with the team and perhaps still at the school, but there is some consideration about, how much more football Justice Terry will play this year. That is speculation. We don't usually deal with speculation on this program. All I can simply say is Justice Terry hadn't played a lot. And the chances of him playing a lot the rest of the way, I guess, would be in doubt for me. It'd be interesting to see him in Athens on Saturday. And again, Justice, the last time we spoke to him, he's very candid with me. He's like, I'm going to take that thing all the way to December. I'm going to let this marathon play out. But you're talking about the number 2 defensive lineman in the country. This is actually the first time, you're talking about neat little things there. This is actually the first road game for Auburn all so far this season. So Justice Terry, he'll get a chance to see the Dogs. And let me just give as we start rolling through these names, folks, this is the first time that Georgia has hosted recruits at home in Athens on a Saturday since the second week of the season against Tennessee Tech. I believe that was September the 7th, I want to say, September the 6th. Don't quote me on that, but first time in almost a month that you've had guys there.
Moving on, we've got another Georgia native on the scene coming to visit. It's going to be Chase Linton, the 4-star edge, undecided at the moment, former Rutgers commit. This is someone who's really been on our radar in the last few weeks. What is it that you like about him?
Well, first of all, Chase is going to kill me if he sees this picture. This is when he was probably 9 years old, 12 years old.
I work with what I have.
We'll get you some better pictures of Chase.
There's nothing wrong with the picture if you're watching.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. He's obviously very talented. He was at Alabama last week for the Georgia at Alabama in Tuscaloosa. He didn't look he was getting prioritized there, but he got a chance to see the Dogs. He got a chance to see that the Dogs can use some pass rush help. Big official visit for him, and I think this recruitment has been kind of leaning Georgia's way for a while now.
Yeah, now we got to go to one who's already been in the class. Took some heat from us on the show earlier, but it's 4-star wide receiver Thomas Blackshear out of Savannah, Georgia. Now knowing what Georgia knows, does the way that they go about hosting him change?
I think you got to recruit him like he's an undecided recruit, even though if he may be committed. When you say those things like, open recruitment but committed, doesn't really fly with me. So Blackshear is a great talent out of the 912 Coastal Empire, but I think right now Blackshear, who's had a strong season so far this year, you've got to treat him like he's got a wandering eye and maybe he's not even a solid verbal right now.
We got another name on the scene for you. I've been practicing this one because Jeff Sentell is the king of names. It's Joseph Mbachu, the 3-star defensive lineman, 2025, Loganville, Georgia, current Florida commit. We won't spend too much time harping on how bad the Gators have been this season, but it makes me think of that tweet where it's like, where are those defensive line guys? I feel like this is another one that's kind of becoming a priority for Georgia because defensive line recruiting is the priority at the moment.
Correct, and that's what they got to finish with, only 2 guys currently committed on the defensive line. Now, they could have upwards of 4, 5, 6 more, including those 2 big 5-stars. But Joseph, I got a chance to see him in Tuscaloosa as well. He saw Georgia last week, so apparently a lot of people need to see the other side, the normal side of Georgia on Saturday in Athens. Man, Mr. Mbachu, loved the story. He was walking the halls this winter. The Grayson coaches had come out for football, 6'6", 285. Kaylee, if I was wanting to sell compression shirts and athletic gear, I would put Mr. Mbachu in one of those because he looked 6'5" plus, 280 pounds. He looked like he was 245. Like, very fit athlete, very athletic, so raw, lots of upside. I think this is a guy that Georgia is going to go hard in the paint for eventually in this class.
Next one's going to be our last one for the class. This is Anthony Crua. He's a 3-star linebacker out of Marietta. He's currently a North Carolina commit. Georgia only has 1 linebacker commit in the 2025 class right now, being Zayden Walker. Do we need one more linebacker in this class, Jeff?
I think Georgia does, at least one more. It'll be interesting to see how things matriculate around November, December. But let me give Kaylee some flowers on this one. Now, we were talking about the Chase Linton picture. Well, Kaylee somehow found one of the rare pictures of Anthony in some UGA gear working out. He's a 3-star linebacker at Marietta High. Folks, he does about everything except cook the bacon for the pregame meal for the Marietta Blue Devils so far this season. Plays some on offense, rushes from a variety of positions. Currently committed to North Carolina, and that is a school that is, let's use a Titanic metaphor here, currently taking on water. They got some guys in deck chairs playing violins. So obviously for him to take another look at the University of Georgia on Saturday, I think could be big.
And those are our 2025 visitors. We've got 2 prime 2026 visitors with you, both 5 stars, starting with this one. This is Jackson Cantwell. He's a 5-star offensive tackle out of Nixa, Missouri. Undecided. I believe that he's one that wants to make his decision sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah, he's got a top 4 team, but really to me, he has a very internal top 4, top 6. I think Georgia's one of those schools. He's already told me that Georgia will get an official. Kaylee, this is the #1 offensive tackle in the country. He's the #2 overall prospect for the 24/7 Sports Composite. I believe his on-3 industry rankings are just as high.
Yeah.
And Jackson is a guy, you want to talk about, he is not an Olympic, but he is the son of an Olympian. And he is putting up national records for sophomores in both the shot put and the discus. His mom was also an All-American in track in college in the field events. So he's already, you got to like about Jackson, is he laid out at the beginning of the year, these are all my visits and these are where I'm going to go. So he's had this visit booked for forever.
Has Georgia ever signed the #1 offensive tackle before?
I believe so. They've signed the #1 overall offensive tackle. So according to different services, for some of them, Broderick Jones was #1. For other ones, guys like Andrew Thomas was never rated that highly. Isaiah Wilson, I believe, was the #3 or 4 rated offensive tackle in the country. So you've got a lot of guys that they've signed the #1 guard and Jamari Salyer that has shifted to play offensive tackle. But, this is a guy, the evaluation came on him because he's really big. He's extremely fast. He's extremely athletic. But, most people, I know they're going to say, great, tell me about another 5-star offensive tackle that's going to join the program. I think that what they want to hear about is more and more, like if you're just joining us, we've spent a lot of time on Hedges tonight talking about playmaking wide receivers. And I think that's what more people want to see or get excited about in the stands for Georgia to have one of those type talents in town.
So our last visitor on this list is going to be Jared Curtis, the 5-star quarterback commit out of Nashville, Tennessee. I think it's so important for Jared Curtis to be at as many home games as possible because this is who you want talking to your 2026s. He's got to recruit the people around him. I'm ecstatic that he's going to be at the game on Saturday.
Yeah, his family tells me he's already got 2 visits already planned this fall. I think he's going to come back for the Tennessee game as well for the Nashville area native. And, one of the things about Jared, I got a chance to see him, folks. He is putting up obscene highlights right now in his junior season. Not only that, is he's pretty dedicated to Georgia no matter who's going to come at him. Big arm, Kaylee. I'm not going to promise you that he has this guy's arm, but he has this guy's game, and that's Josh Allen. Now, I know you folks out there want Before the Hedges program brought to you by Kroger to find a lot of Jalen Milrose that will commit to the University of Georgia. Maybe we can't find you one of those. We can find you a dual threat that can launch that thing a long way with big arm talent, maybe the best arm talent since Matt Stafford in Georgia. And he's going to run around with a little bit of the wiggle and a little bit of the swerve that you saw with Stetson Bennett. Oh, yeah, he's also doing that in about a 6'4", 220-pound frame.
Yeah, look, guys, Jeff is not all bark, no bite here. We've got some proof to back this up, and we're going to do it right here on Mansell's Details, which starts with the best plays that we could find from the 2025-2026 classes. We've got a few for you before we get to Dog of the Week. We're going to start with the 5-star linebacker, Zayden Walker. Again, 5-star linebacker, but they've also got him playing offense for his team. He had 10 tackles, 3 for a loss, and a sack. His team did take a loss to Macon County, but he's a 5-star linebacker who also had a rushing and a receiving touchdown.
Kaylee, there's a good joke here. People are going to ask, they want to see where the 5-star receivers are. Well, this is the best we can do. We've got a 5-star linebacker playing receiver for the Dogs, and he had another big explosive play as a kind of this same play right here, getting him out in space, and he went for about 75 yards as well. Not a touchdown, but hey, this is the best we can do on Before the Hedges. We can have 5 stars playing receiver, if not 5-star receivers.
Yeah, we'll make do with what we got. We just spent some time talking about Jared Curtis, so I feel like we've got to put up a Jared Curtis highlight. 18 for 30 for 258 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Oh, and had a rushing touchdown on the ground. This is one of the craziest plays I've ever seen from any high school player. So mobile. It's
funny. I made a comment about Jared on social media this morning, and I said one of the best parts about this story, makes me smile every time, is he grew up with a horse named Bomb. You just love that. Grew up on a farm, big family guy, lots of four-wheelers, lots of ATVs. But somebody was laughing at me because I used the phrase dual threat ability to describe Jared Curtis. Folks, I don't know about you. You can do your own taste tests on this one. You like your taster's choice or whatever. But if that's not a dual threat quarterback, I don't know what is.
All right, we got one more before we get to our dog of the week. This one comes from the 5-star edge, Isaiah Gibson, who had 6 tackles, 2 for a loss.
Ooh.
I mean, I imagine that he probably knocked the breath out of that kid, right?
He cooked that kid right there. That guy is one of those, that looks like a commercial for airbags or a commercial for one of those things, the Guardian skull caps that people wear in games now in the NFL. He also had a big sack in that game as well.
Well, these were the best ones we could find, but our dog of the week this week outshined everyone. This is Dog of the Week.
I'm a big dog, no leash. You all bark, no teeth. That's a whole lot of wins on me. That's a whole lot of wins on me.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time we've had someone who's been Dog of the Week twice?
This is Before the Hedges history right here. Two-timer, Talon Taylor. Kaylee, tell him what he's won.
All right, the 4-star wide receiver out of Geneva High School had 4 receptions for 183 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jeff, he averaged 45.8 yards per catch. That's crazy. And on top of that, I mean, as if that wasn't enough, he also sets the school record for career touchdown catches. He might not be the 5-star flashy Ryan Williams that DawgNation is hoping for, but he might be the closest thing that we have in this class.
Perfectly well said there, Kaylee. I'm going to tell you 2 things about Talon Taylor, and you want to take these to the bank. Number 1, look how he sets his school record for career touchdown catches with 26. Look at this one right here. Now, Kaylee, I'm going to give you, this is the stat of the night, the stat of the stats, Kaylee, for Georgia football recruiting. You guys want to see a Ryan Williams? Well, a Ryan Williams type. It is my feeling that this guy right here has a lot of those same skills. I believe he's already 17 years old, so please not disqualify him for that. But Talon Taylor, this is the absolute stat. I've got 2 good ones. This is going to be in a future DawgNation.com article. Kaylee, Talon Taylor has 18 catches this year. You know how many touchdowns he has?
16.
12.
Oh.
Now, Kaylee, I like the way you're thinking.
I got excited.
Kaylee, I like the way you're thinking, but I'm going to consider that a batting average. And 12 out of 18 is pretty dang good. I think that's 60% of his catches have gone for 70% of his catches have gone for touchdowns. The coach at Geneva High School was telling me this week, his name is Boone Thorgerson, and they have an auto camera set up on the top of their press box to track their players for huddle. And he said Talon was moving so fast this week that the auto camera couldn't keep up, and they were catching his tail lights, so to speak, trying to keep up with Talon Taylor. Again, 12 touchdown catches out of 18 total catches. Talon Taylor trending towards 5-star status. That's also, maybe it's not what you wanted, but right there, that is the type of player that you get that guy, you get him to be a Georgia Bulldog for 2 or 3 seasons. By that 3rd season, I think you're looking at an All-American type player.
Is this someone who could get quick playing time?
I think so. And I think he's a guy that Georgia would want to get him playing time. He's already 6'1". He's a little bit over, right around 180. So the physical frame is a little bit there. He's going to be bigger than a guy like Anthony Evans. But Kelly, really the reason why I say that is he has incredible positional versatility where he can be a slot, he can be an X, he can be a Z. I'm going to share one more Talon Taylor story just because you folks need to hear it. Talking to Georgia DB commits this summer about Talon Taylor when they got to camp against him, they said, this guy's crazy. I've never seen anything like it. He has the ability to be a 4.5 going along in his route, and then he reaches into his bag and he breaks out that 4.2 speed out of nowhere. That's something really impressive, how he's got that suddenness to Talon Taylor.
Well, Talon Taylor, when you set a school record and you average 45.8 yards per catch, you are rightfully our dog of the week, even if it is back-to-back. We'll give you your flowers. Keep doing you. Can't wait to see what you come on the field and do next year. That is Mansell's details, but while we're on the high school subject, let's do our high school game of the week. It's going to be Collins Hill at Buford, 2 top 5 teams, cross-county rivals. I saw Buford get chippy earlier this year. I think that game could get pretty chippy this Friday.
Kaylee, one thing about Collins Hill, I think they have perhaps the best secondary, maybe the best defense in the state. Let's also do fair and balanced coverage. This was a game that has been postponed a lot, but Camden County undefeated is going to go to Valdosta undefeated. They will play on Saturday. Big news Saturday, it seems like those two undefeated teams in region play will also play, and I feel like that deserves co-game of the week honors as well.
All right, it's that time in the show where we got to do our things that we do every single week. It's our question of the week and our class breakdown. This question of the week, just some trivia. How long has it been since Auburn won in Athens? I accidentally looked up the answer, so I can't.
Kelly, what were you doing back in the day when the last time Georgia won in Athens?
I mean, probably taking a nap.
Taking a nap? Been a while, especially because of the last few wins, and Auburn hadn't had a lot of them since they've beaten Georgia, period. I think the last 3 wins out of the last 16 games. I think Georgia's like 13 out of the last 16. The only time they've beaten Georgia has been in Auburn, Alabama, on the loveliest village on the plain. But, folks, I'm giving you a little bit of time to maybe Google and act like you're smart in the comment section when really you've had to have your answer in by now if you really want to know this. The correct answer is 2005, Kaylee. That's the last time. Really, Auburn, you look at this series history, they're having trouble marshaling up more than 1 touchdown per game every time they come to Athens.
All right, well, that is our question of the week. Let's go ahead and do our class breakdown for you. This is just a reminder of all the players that Georgia has currently committed in the 2025 class. No changes to the offense. Georgia still remains at 1 5-star, 10 4-stars, and 1 3-star, but no 5-star wide receivers. We'll see what's to come with the changes in the future. Let's flip to the defensive side of the ball. Again, no changes as of now, but I do feel like this is one that could change potentially very soon. With our defensive line group, stands with 2 5-stars, 5 4-stars, 2 3-stars. Now let's look at our recruiting snapshot, arguably the most beautiful slide here on Before the Hedges. I think the important thing to pay attention to is that class ranks at number 5. It doesn't look like Georgia's going to be able to get to number 1, but if they do add the 5-star defensive linemen and Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry, I imagine Georgia will go up.
Yeah, the other thing to think about, Kaylee, here is you would add potentially on Saturday with Usman Chroma, another in-state commitment. You would probably jump past Auburn again on the recruiting rankings as well as on the field to go to number 4. But you'd also add another top 100 overall prospect to the class as well, and those are the things everybody wants to see.
And this is the part where we do our top targets. Who is it that Georgia could still potentially be looking for? At least on this half, it would all have to be flips. But I think DawgNation is really excited to see 7 Cloud still on that list. No changes.
Yeah, but I got some cool things to share. Mbachu's going to be in there. 7 Cloud tells me he will be in Athens on Saturday.
Ooh.
It will not be for his official. He's saving that official visit for later, likely the Tennessee game. Kevin Wynn would be very interesting if he makes it back to Athens town. Jeremiah McLeod, he tells me he's not really sure if he's going to make it back to Athens yet. He's got an eye on an official visit for later in the year. He may go back to visit those lousy stinking, as Brandon Adams likes to say it. Braxton Kyle, I actually expect him to be in Athens as well. I think that will also be an unofficial.
All right, and our last page of top targets, I want you guys to recognize that Usman Chroma has moved from 5 to 4. You don't do that often.
He's actually was, I think, 6, and a few weeks ago, he jumped in there.
That's a lot of movement.
If you want to talk about a guy climbing the charts, that's what I think Mr. Chroma is doing. Again, Chase Linton, called that name to mind. We talked about him earlier. He's going to be in town on his official visit, very likely to see Justice Terry. And, folks, if you want even more good news during this segment, remember, Elijah Griffin will be taking his official visit next weekend for the Mississippi State game. That's also his birthday weekend that he wants to spend in Athens with his loved ones and his family, and I will let you draw your own conclusions from there.
And this is our just off the list. We've got 2 pages of this, including Tay Harris, the former Georgia commit. Could any of these guys potentially put themselves in a position to where they become on our top targets list?
Yeah, I think Christian Ingram, he's a guy that his older brother played basketball at Georgia. He was basically ecstatic and crying when he got the Georgia offer. He also has offers from everybody else now. He was in Tuscaloosa. They gave him the VIP treatment as well. Now it's Georgia's turn to kind of return serve as well. We also mentioned A.J. Crua as well out of Marietta.
All right, we got one more page of just off the list again. people that are already committed elsewhere. I just don't know if I'm ever going to stop being able to bring up C.J. Wiley. Maybe it's just because I was there and I experienced it when he picked Florida State, but Florida State is not getting any better.
Yeah. You know, one of the things there is going to be the fit and the feel with Wiley. That's how we just always liked Florida State better. I don't know, and this is the knee jerk. This is a popular question I got. Why don't Georgia just drop a much larger NIL sum on C.J. Wiley and kind of fix that? Maybe add to the firepower there at wide receiver. You know, I think the world of C.J. Wiley. I really do. I think his family's great. I think his work ethic's great. But for me to sit there and say that he's going to come in and play like Ryan Williams did against Georgia on Saturday, I don't know if he's that type of player, that instant impact player. Like, I've had people in Alabama tell me that, Ryan Williams was one of the greatest high school players they've ever seen in the whole state of Alabama. He was a 2-time Mr. Football winner, sophomore and junior years, and now, C.J. Wiley would certainly help. C.J. Wiley would certainly be better. But in this era, Kayla, I'm going to counsel this. If they don't like Georgia off the jump and they like someone else, and you let money be the deciding factor, I don't think that's a recipe for sticking and thriving in Athens.
All right, Jeff, as we wrap up the show, you get one final word, whether it's words of wisdom, what to expect on Saturday. Maybe you want to follow up on what happened this past Saturday. This is your Sentelligence time.
Kaylee, I'll say this. First of all, did I surprise you with all those soap operas I could throw out right there?
I had very high expectations for you.
Come on.
I mean, I'm not saying that you disappointed me, but the bar was already set really high.
So that was the fun stuff. Let me say this. Here's how I know all that we've said today and all that we've bled today and all that we've kind of offered up to the folks out there, the good folks out there. If it works, if Talon Taylor catches a touchdown next season in Athens against Alabama, I think it's working. That's what you want to see happen. If I had to dust off a crystal ball and say, if Georgia's moving in the right direction, how great would it be, DawgNation, if Talon Taylor catches a big touchdown to beat Alabama in Athens next season? I think he's the type of player that could do that.
I think you would call that some poetic justice. DawgNation, thank you for joining us today here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell. We'll see you again next Wednesday on all DawgNation video channels at 7 o'clock.
Let's go, I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking?